At first, you're going to laugh and say, that was a dumb idea. And then I'm going to tell you how I made my first million at 30, and you're going to realize it wasn't a dumb idea, because you can't put a tiger in a cage and just leave it there because it'll eat its feet off to get out. I needed to get out. So I started a company. If you take the invention of the telegraph, the telephone, the automobile, the airplane, and you multiply it by 10,000, that's the impact of AI. It's so scary that people should have heart attacks if they really knew this.
Hi, everyone. Daniel Kube here, CEO of ServicePath, and this is a continuation of our series of executive discussions for our LinkedIn group. And I have a very esteemed guest and friend, Ed Golod, who has a very storied past with lots of great stories and lots of great learnings and understanding. He's someone I absolutely respect, just based on how he has built his knowledge and the things and solutions he continues to build and bring to market. Even though Ed and I might look like dinosaurs, but we are lifelong learners and are always looking for new ways to deploy solutions to help add value to our customers, our prospects, and our teams.
Hey, Dan, if that was an opening for me, that was great, by the way. I feel important today. Let me get my wife over here to make sure she knows I'm smart.
On that note, Ed, I'd love for you to share maybe a bit about your background, because the one thing you and I continually talk about is how knowledge is fluid and constantly changing and robust. And one of the narratives that you love to talk about is the language of sales. But when we all started our careers, we're not conversant in any language, really. We learned as we went. But the one consistent theme that you've always been in has been the enterprise. And you've been a performer, a trainer, a leader, a closer, a quota maker. All the things are important in sales, but more importantly, you've applied your learnings to help other people expand their horizons and be better salespeople. So I'd love for you to share a bit about your history and how you got there, and then we'll delve into some other questions, if that's cool.
Great. I'll give you the moderate to not long answer. So for everybody listening, at first you're going to laugh and say, that was a dumb idea. And then I'm going to tell you how I made my first million at 30, and you're going to realize it wasn't a dumb idea. My parents divorced when I was 11, and we lived in an apartment that had much money. I slept on the couch till I was 15. And my mother sold shoes, and my dad was a non-union plumber. So money was really, really important. And I got into Indiana University, and I was all set to go to a really good school and actually be somebody. And at the last minute, my mother and I had an argument with one of the guys that she was getting to date, and I hit him, and she threw him out of the apartment. So I couldn't go to Indiana University. I didn't have any money. That back then was like $40,000. So my mother gives me a shoebox with $5,000 in it and said, here's your college. She saved that over 20 years in bills. So I went to college, and it was Plattsburgh State School, inexpensive, and I majored in chemistry. And it was a science-based college, and it shared the city with a SAC base, Strategic Air Command. So basically, I went to a small city that was half Air Force, half college. When I got to college, I realized I didn't want to sell chemicals, but I wanted a technical background. So I went to Dr. Donahoe, who ran the communications department, and I said, look, Doc, I know you love me. Everybody loves me, but I'm not learning enough with this chemistry. It's killing me with physics, calculus. How do I become very wealthy? And I want to sell. And he goes, that's ridiculous. You don't go to school for that. Well, that led to a custom program. I graduated out of my university in the state with the only body ever in sales. So I went to college to sell. Dumb idea, right? That's number one, dispelling the truth. I was 19 years old selling vacuum cleaners door to door. I made $3,600 in 9 weeks 40 years ago. My parents didn't make that in 8 months. So selling is where the money is. If you're young and listening, you're nodding your head. That's right. I'm going to make a lot of money, get a new BMW M3. I get that. Then I got out of college and I had to sell. So I had to sell office equipment and anything I get my hands on. From that, I cold called my way into UNIVAC, or Unisys as it is now, and got into computers. I didn't know much about that, so I had to wing it on a prayer. And after a year in heavy software and hardware, I then said, I got to get a job I can really sell. I got into mainframes, and I was selling mainframe equipment. And that was the year that I was number one for 3 years in a 32 million public company. And then I quit and said, I'm going to build my own company. Now, if you're listening, well, why would you quit if you were making all that money back then and you had a great job? Because you can't put a tiger in a cage and just leave it there because it'll eat its feet off to get out in its paws. I needed to get out. So I started a company. And that's why selling to me was my career, and selling enabled me to build a company. And that's where I ended up making my first million. And I built the United States market on command and control. I built rooms like NASA in the Fortune 100. So to make a long answer to a great question, if you're selling and you don't understand language today, and we'll talk about that, you probably won't even have a job in 3 years. But let's get to that as Dan asks questions.
Great. So that's a great segue. So I mean, just talking about, you've had these careers. You talked about mainframe, but you also moved up the stack and worked in the software layer.
Right.
So, how was that different from the hardware world? And were the customers the same? And do those attributes of the enterprise, have they changed and morphed over time? Like, how has that evolved, and how do people who are going to be watching this take this information to say, how can I apply this today, not from like 30 years ago?
Great question. Really great question. By the way, I'm not conscious that I'm old, and I am old. I could be anyone's father out there, and that's an old father. But remember this, and never forget this, and write this down. What's the average age of a CFO, CEO, CIO, CISO, CTO in a Fortune 500 company? And they're not 32 years old. So, if you're in a career today, as I was back then, in the mainframe business, there was only 20 vendors. Now there's 20,000 every month coming out. India's putting out 4,000 startups a month. So I figured out early I needed to be current. So I moved from mainframe equipment. I built my own business, did that till I was 46. And then I had a transition, and I didn't know what to do. So I said, well, what's hot? And what was hot back then in the mid 90s, early 90s, was advanced graphics, advanced computer processing, advanced visualization, very advanced interface work, early days of the GUI. And so I got into Microsoft, and I got into a division that made 3D CGI. I actually sold the software that made Godzilla, and my buddy Gary in LA sold the software that made the dinosaurs in Jurassic Park. So at the ripe old age of 47, I knew more about advanced graphics than anybody. And that was great for me, but that wasn't enough. And then I had to get into analytics. So I worked at SAS Institute, and that wasn't enough because I was getting old. So I had to get into digital marketing. So I went to Eloqua, best job I ever had. And I was top 3 or 4 in the company, and I managed American Express. So the point is, today or yesterday, you must be current with what's hot in sales, what's hot in product, and what corporations are hot in acquiring and fitting into their stack. Except today, Dan, the speed of transition, it's out of control. There's a picture on the wall of a custom 86 Lotus Turbo that I used to race, modified by Lotus Cars itself and the CEO. That car's not a dinosaur. That car will go around the Serpentine faster than a Viper, or faster than a 930 Porsche, or faster than a Ferrari, or any other car. It's old, but the technology is made for today because of the speed and the handling. If you don't have technology today that's made for corporations, you're a dinosaur. So that's how I kept pace. That's how I ended up here.
Yeah. So that's a great sort of level set. So, one of the things that there's a lot of myths and false truths about sales. And I'm trying to, what have you learned? Like, when you started your career, you thought something was absolutely true. And now that you know that you've, done it several cycles in different organizations, what are the fundamental truths and what are the falsehoods that, people should avoid?
That's probably the single best question I've ever been asked. And now I'm going to tell you why I'm not being trite or flippant. So back 30, 40 years ago, there was a few big sales trainers like Tony Parinello selling to Vito and things like that, but there weren't many. There was no place to learn how to sell enterprise. There was no SaaS. So he was selling heavy software, big hardware. And back then, even in my 30s, when I walked into a bank, I did every bank in the country. And when I walked into a bank and I was in a facility environment and somebody walked in, they were over 50, they were attached to finance budgets, they were attached to technology, they were attached to political problems getting in as a vendor, they were attached to a buying group, they were attached to IT saying we could do everything. It's the same stuff today. It's the same stuff today. What's different is now we have AI, and the corporations know that if you're an average seller with an average product, you think you're going to be Bill Gates when you get in with AI and you'll be able to handle it. That's a big, big falsehood, because today to do deals is the same that it was in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s, etc. End of the day, you're selling to a public company, generally speaking. If you're selling to a mom and pop, I'm not your guy, so why don't you hang up the phone and go get a soda? So if you're selling to an enterprise, it's still run the same way. Shareholder value, business impact, how does it fit our company strategically? So from that perspective, what I've learned then and what I know now is, thank God, I have skill that's current today. But if you don't have a financial acumen and you don't understand complexity within corporations and how they do things and how they buy and how they aggregate meetings and decisioning, wow, it's hard.
So was your falsehood that initially you thought you didn't need that financial acumen or to talk that language and impact, like from a McKinsey perspective, like?
Well, you know me really well, so I could be myself. No, the falsehood is how stupid people are to think that it's so different today. They could use whiz-bang product launches, whiz-bang software pitching, whiz-bang tools to, get in and do access and demand creation. No, the falsehood is there is no falsehood. It's the same stuff. If I had the time today, I probably could prove to you that in 1900, when they first started making automobiles, if you were selling corn or wheat or cows, same thing they're doing today. It's the same process, just more information.
Yeah, one of my observations I'd love to get your comments on are, I've seen how the customer interface with the sales team or the organization continues to get less and less and less, almost to the end of where they're doing vendor selection now. And, AI is an incredible tool because AI in a lot of ways enables the buyer to make super informed decisions because they can actually run the assumptions very quickly, saying, would this vendor actually have a true impact on my business? And before, that lens always used to be pre-interpreted by the seller's organization to the buyer. Now buyers are really empowered to make really informed choices and decisions. Do you agree with that? Or do you still believe buyers are so close to their pain that sometimes they can't see the forest through the trees, or vice versa?
Wow, that's a really good question. That's a two-tier question. So on the first tier, I live like an hour from Gartner. I've done business at Gartner. I met and know Craig Safian, the CFO. I love these guys. I wish I was an executive at Gartner. They're telling you 85% of the executives in the Fortune 500 are doing what Dan just said. You got to be stupid not to believe that's a prima facie, unrefuted fact. It is a fact. Go to MIT and go online and tell you the same thing. And then I hear the numbers are going to 90%. So yes, the corporations don't need a rep at all until they're even close to thinking about it. That's the good news. Let me tell you the bad news. I forgot his name. He's older than both of us. He's like a spirit god. He's like the oldest guy at Google who was there when they invented Google, like the head program developer executive at Google. Is in his mid 70s, and he quit and went online and LinkedIn about, I don't know, 6-8 months ago, a year ago, and said, I'm leaving. I'm done. I'm going to spend the rest of my life in the betterment of civilization and mankind because AI will do this to us. And he made a comment like, if you take the invention of the telegraph, the telephone, the automobile, the airplane, the creation of penicillin and viral type of drugs, and you put them all together and you multiply it by 10,000, that's the impact of AI. It's so scary that people should have heart attacks if they really knew this. So I predict, and you can see Will Smith talking to the AI bot 8 years ago. There's YouTube videos where they're now having human-looking bots walking and talking and serving coffee. I predict in 12 months, the BDR SDR will be done. The sales reps will have to become specialists in operations and control and finance so they could be a consultant. And I predict in 2 years, they will morph into letting the buyer not just buy, but buy with an expert. Buy with an expert meaning, like I love Dan. I love his CPQ product. I was there when he built the company. I was there when he started the company. And I love what he does. This is a pitch. It's coming from me. He didn't tell me to do this. But ServicePath can plug into anything, literally anything. So why am I bringing that up? Because the enterprise buyer is looking at, well, if I'm going to buy a product from a vendor, does it fit my stack? Does it fit my IT roadmap? Does it fit my product roadmap? Does it fit my strategic roadmap? Is it financially fiduciary sound? They're doing all that without us. So to answer your question, it's wicked scary, but I also think it's wicked opportunistic. That's why at my age, I'm making great coin and I'm in demand because I understand it.
And so, Ed, I know you're a big proponent of sales strategy, and you've books that you and I read, we've read, Miller Hyman, Strategic Selling, Spin Selling, Rackham. But, the last analogy that you talked about, like BDRs, being removed by sort of agentic interfaces or agentic conversations. But that next level of rep will become like the challenger, sort of in the challenger sale world. But I know you've stayed in touch with those guys who wrote Challenger Sale, and they have some opinions on where this market and where sales reps are going. Maybe you could share and also marry that with your vision for AI in the future.
And by the way, that's a great question. And no, this isn't loaded because these questions are layups. This is like giving Gretzky the puck. Though I'm not Gretzky, I'm not saying that. So if you're listening and you want to learn something really cool, go buy the book Selling to Vito, very influential top officer. Tony Parinello is a good friend of mine. He put that out in the 80s. And for 25 years, he was the only guy in the world that could pick up a phone and call a CEO of any Fortune company. He was the only guy doing real training. He built the training sales industry in the day, and he only had one book. And all he talked about was writing a letter. Just write a letter to an executive. Well, if you go forward and you look at everything, and Dan's right, I've not only taken these courses, I've taught this stuff. I've taught Challenger. I haven't taught Miller Hyman, but I've used it. Medic, I've taught. Challenger is interesting, and I know the guy, and I know two of the partners that are behind the business. I don't know Matt Dixon personally, but I've worked with these guys. Challenger is a very simple process. Hey, I got a meeting next week. I'm talking to Dan, my buddy, having coffee in Toronto. And I said, I got this meeting. I got to go to CIBC Bank, and I'm meeting the EVP of retail banking, and I'm trying to pitch him this new form of digital wallet on a watch so I can do my checking and I can check all my, banking, and it's a whole new platform. So I got to go pitch this guy. And what do I say to that guy? It's the same. So Challenger says, well, I'm going to tell him what he doesn't know. I'm going to challenge him. I'm going to challenge him, say, his name is Steve. So Steve, have you thought of this, and why aren't you doing that? And why aren't you addressing this type of demographic who is not attuned to using the bank tools, etc.? That's Challenger. In my opinion, call it what you want. That's the only way to sell. If you look up McKinsey and Bain and the big three and you go deeper, it's the only way to sell. So I printed out this page that I have. So one page. It's one page. Talk about it later, but it's a business case, one page. And there's a sentence on the top in yellow. This is Rivian car, and there's a vendor trying to sell Rivian car. Okay, right. They want to compete with Tesla. And the sentence says on the top, Rivian is leaking 500,000 to 1.5 million per line annually due to slow insight to action cycles. And here's how VoltEdge recovers that in 60 days. Line meaning there's multiple lines. This is probably a $75 to $100 million revenue erosion problem. So to answer your question, that's what I'm going to say to the guy at CIBC. That's the thing I'm going to say to anybody I get a meeting with. And they're going to say, yeah, you're right. No one's talking about that much, but that's why our problem is so deep. That, my friend, is Challenger selling, but you got to have a deep education. That's where sales is. That's where it was. And that's where it's going even faster. Just give it to me. Bottom line, don't waste my time, and don't sell me because I can figure this out without you. So there's the door, Mr. Salesperson or Miss Salesperson.
So, the analogy, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. And this is where sort of sales is a science and an art. And the guy who I probably appreciate the most is Rackham from Spin Selling, because unless the customer has the epiphany themselves, you're pushing on a rope, right? And Challenger, I know they leverage some of those strategies because it's pre-Challenger, but is that still the case with AI? Do you handle things differently from the epiphany perspective? Do you use AI to help the customer find that epiphany? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I got trained on Neil's stuff. I think Rackham and Spin was awesome. I also got to know Charlie Green, who lives in New Jersey, an hour from me, who wrote Trust-Based Selling, or Selling as a Trusted Advisor. He's awesome, but he's not as detailed as Neil in Rackham. So the epiphany, and in due respect, I disagree. It's not an epiphany. It's a translation. When I was single, I had a motorcycle, and when I would date girls and I'd go up the steps of their house on concrete, but I had one time a father threw me down a flight of stairs and broke my arm. Get that thing out of here. My daughter's not going on a motorcycle. You're a bum. I got thrown around a lot on that. So there's no epiphany in telling me I'm going to get beat up on that motorcycle. The problem is not, are they thinking about it? The problem is, in 10 minutes, can you help them? Because if you can't, they don't have time to hear what you have. It's too complicated.
I would sort of counter that. So I'd love your opinion on this, because it depends on if your space is known or not known to the buyer. So if they don't know what a motorcycle is, and the fact that you're probably getting hit by a driver's not paying attention, but if they've never seen one before, but the implication question was all about for them to begin to understand how it would impact their business or themselves, to help drive that in epiphany. Whereas in a lot of cases, some people are known buyer, they understand enterprise integration or whatever the challenge may be. So it's a very different sort of sales discussion, but still you need to give them the differentiation between you and the other vendor you're competing with in a known space. In an unknown space, you're helping educate and help transform.
You are exactly right, but you're 10 years behind the time. See, 10 years ago, you're right. You could value sell, you could spin sell, you could challenge sell, you could even feature sell, my goodness sake. You can do that at a VP level, and after 8 or 9 months or a year, you'll probably pop a deal if you get a good you'll probably pop a deal if you get a good relationship with the guy or the woman buyer. We're on a different planet. Google is almost done. I mean, we're using AI to like, how do I boil my spaghetti and make it al dente? Because my mother-in-law's coming over. So we're in a whole nother plateau. So I know, I don't believe, here, I'm going to prove it to you. If we're in a court of law and you say something that can't be refuted, you could win a case if the jury says, well, you're right. That's prima facie. That's black and white. Here's an unrefuted fact right now. There's 5,500 companies in America that are public. There's 40,000 companies in the world that are public. We all sell to them, generally speaking, Fortune 2000, Fortune 5000, etc. We all sell to them. They have one common thing that's been going on for 150 years, and it's never going to change, ever. There's fear of failure. My boss's wants to do this. I'm going to get in line. When the CEO says something, you get in line. Number two, I want to get my bonus. I want to get measured. I got 3 kids. I need to make my money. I'm just going to do my job. I don't want to get fired. So there's fear of failure, fear of rejection. If my boss says do this, I'm going to do it. And it all comes from the top. And the top comes from the CEO, who goes to the board, and the board says, it's real simple. What kind of shareholder value have you generated as a CEO? How much share price have we gone up? Do we have more positioning and money in the market? What the heck does that have to do with being a rep in Des Moines right now selling CPQ software? It only has to do with that corporations run that way. They're like herds of sheep. So therefore, if you're not selling value and impact and strategic impact to the top and the bottom and middle together, you're in a very long cycle 10 years ago. Today, you're not in a cycle because they can decide what to do without you. And if you don't lead, and Oracle comes in, and they're a bunch of dumbasses, and they don't have the brains that you think in selling because they're big, they'll still buy from them because they're the standard. Instead of buying from ServicePath, which does so much better than them, but it's the way the herd goes. So whether it's a known market or an unknown market, you need to sell where the power and the money is. And Neil Rackham figured that out 30 years ago. Tony Parinello figured that out 40 years ago. And the guys that invented Challenger and Matt Dixon that wrote the Challenger book figured that out 20 years ago. So how come it's still working?
You read the new book as well, Ed?
I read The Jolt Effect. I know Rory Shanner from the group. He's a really great guy. I know The Jolt Effect, and there's another book coming out as well about status quo. Yeah, here's the fact. So Rory calls me up. He's a wonderful, wonderful guy. I met him, I don't know, 12 years ago. We stayed friends off and on. And I wanted to work with him. And he says, well, I'll give you a lead. And he gives me a lead to Baker McKenzie, the world's largest law firm. 6,000 attorneys for me to do some of my work that I do in helping them sell to executives. And I'm hanging out with Rory, and I said, Rory, by the way, your new book, The Jolt Effect, is great. And there's a book coming out after, and 85% of the deals are lost to status quo. He goes, that's right. I said, well, and how come every vendor in America is not selling financial solution to their tech, a strategic solution to their tech, an operational solution to their tech, and roll it up and say, here we go? Why aren't they doing that? Because it's hard and they don't know how to do it. So they're going to lose 85% of their deals anyway. Rory was one of the first to even say that. So at the end of the day, selling is hard, but if you have your act together, it's not that hard.
So, I mean, and it would be great for you maybe to share, that initial theme of, the language of sales and also the language of translating impact for an executive, and what you at Revenue Accelerators, your current company, help reps get ahead of the pack and create that, I guess, with sort of fluency and ability to leverage those patterns to get those connections and discussions happening.
That's a great pitch. If you were listening, you're going, I probably paid Dan $300 for that pitch. But that's baloney because I didn't pay him a dime. So I'd rather be teaching at a college right now than be working, so I can give back. So I'm going to answer his question with a teaching moment. Number one, ROI, stupid. It's a stupid thing. Stupid. I don't do them, and they're stupid. Why are they stupid? Because the companies do it themselves. Every CFO turns to a head of finance and goes, Steve, we're looking to get the close on this deal for 400 grand. Run the numbers. They don't need a vendor ROI or vendor value model. So that's one problem in particular. The second situation is that when you're selling impact, or you're selling how you generate a change in a company, it's very operational. I don't know if that answers your question, because I got on a sidetrack for a minute, but.
No, I think so. For example, your old incarnation, the speed sheet, right? You basically armed a rep with something to enable an interaction with a senior exec at the highest level of an organization to begin to have something that would open that discussion and door to help them show, or what's the word I'm looking, a moat that they understand some of the challenges of that business, and they applied how their solution could help impact, the recovery or the
Right.
reduction of that leakage or the acceleration of that growth.
Exactly. That was my one-page business case. I got a provisional patent pending on that. Yeah, I mean, this is what I do for a living, but this is a killer story. Like my son, one of my sons, very successful, big golfer. And he took his father-in-law to a big-time club. I don't know. I don't play golf, but in Florida, like a millionaire club. And he says to his father-in-law, hey, let's go in the locker room. I have to pick something up. And in the locker room was Jack Nicklaus. He was in the locker room. He's like 87. And Rory, my son, starts talking to him, and his father-in-law is like, oh my God, there's Jack. And they had this amazing moment. I had one of those moments where I sent the one-page business case to Marvin Ellison, the CEO of Lowe's, $91 billion. And I got an answer in 9 days. And the CMO, Jocelyn Wong, gets a hold of me and said, Mr. Ellison, got your business brief. We're interested to learn more. And next thing you know, I'm flying down to North Carolina. So I have a million stories on that. But that was a failure, that product. And it cost me a lot of money because the reps wouldn't use it. The VPs loved it. Hey, send it to the top person. You'll get a conversation. The top person will say, oh, this is interesting. I'm running Nestle food. I don't have time for this thing. I'll send it down to Dan Kube. He's my VP of production. Hey, Dan, look at it. And when that went down to Dan, it's like, oh my God, this came from my boss's boss's boss. Like, I got to talk to the vendor. I got to look at this thing. It was a hot potato, we called it. Well, the reps didn't want to use it because they were afraid. This is hundreds and hundreds of reps I polled. They don't want to use it because they were afraid my phone would ring and to be the CEO of like Estee Lauder. Well, I got this document. I want you to explain to me the return on investment based on the net present value of the capitalization. Never happened in a million years. They don't know how to sell, and they can't speak the language. So I'm bantering because I'm passionate. I make enough dough that if you don't want to call me up and buy from me, that's fine. But I'm really passionate. And I've been a 3-time CEO of my own company. I've done 712 deals, $250 million in sales. I know my shit. And a senior executive wants to talk about what they want to talk about. So in one page, give it to them. Here's my product. Here's how it aligns strategically to your company, because I've analyzed your 10Q and I've read your earning reports. But here's how it aligns operationally. Like, you can't fix this problem, but maybe you don't care right now, and it's okay. You can't do everything as a company. And here's financially how it operates and helps you. And maybe you don't care if you make more money. So this is a no decision, and I will not get a meeting with you or sell you. But 3 out of 10 will say, I'll listen. But I can't say I'll do anything else. Nobody does this because they don't speak the language. When I got married to my second wife, Bianca, the good wife, we honeymooned in Italy. And I am Jewish. She's Italian, from the old school, old country. And I wanted to learn Italian, and I didn't have time. And I thought, how cool would that be if I could, go, hey, how you doing? But not in English, but real Italian, right? And I learned the hard way. Once we got to Italy, it's not the Italian language. It's the language that they speak in Naples or in southern Italy and Sicily or in Milan. There's dialects. And it was like, this is really complicated. If you're listening and you have a list of 100 accounts, you know what you got? You got 100 accounts where each account's got 5 different dialects because they're talking ops, finance, strategy, growth, AI combating it, the nonsense with the tariffs, which is actually a good thing, and what do we do economically? And you're there to sell them your software. So to make a long story short, the language you need is the language of the CEO, the board, the CFO, the COO, and everybody up there, the 10 that dictate the 5,000 below that work for them, so you can speak that language. It blows my mind how they don't teach this in college today in 2025. But that's what I do. That's what Dan does. And it's a crime that more people don't do it. And they don't do this at Oracle, by the way. And they don't do this at SAS. And they don't do this at Teradata. And I worked for all those companies. Well, not Oracle, but.
So, and one of the things you love to teach, and one of the things when I think about like what has helped me become successful and what continues to help me stay abreast of new developments, and those would be mentors. So for example, I'm in a CEO peer group with a bunch of other really great smart guys in all different sort of ages and all sort of different technologies, and that keeps me sharp. And the other area where I get lots of insight is, I do a bunch of angel investing, constantly getting pitched new ideas, and like maybe talk about some of your mentors and how you approach like lifelong learning. Because, I'm of the view that mentorship never ends because there's always someone smarter in the room, someone more relevant. And it's not even dependent on age now. Like some of the kids coming out of school are so ahead of the pack on like pulling AI solutions together in combination that, become mind blowing. I'd love to get your perspective and thoughts on that.
That's a really good question. I came from very modest beginnings, very, very modest. I was the first in my family to have a European car, to buy a home, a real home, start a business. I'm old school. And most of the clients that I would sell to that sell to big companies think that way. I don't really have I worked at Microsoft and I thought Bill Gates was great. I didn't look up to many people except somebody with hard knocks. And even like the guys like Schultz that runs Starbucks, they all came from really poor backgrounds. But I don't learn from those guys. I'll tell you who I learned from. And this is AI has helped me. AI has helped me to answer this question from my good friend Dan right now. So AI has helped me. Then I'm reading it because I wanted to not forget. So it's a guy named Roger Martin, Ram Charan, Herminia Ibarra, and there's a few others. But these are world famous authors on topics. I'm talking like 10 books, like Peter Drucker people, on what is the brain like into a large company or an enterprise or a CEO. I want to know the brain of that because I ran a company at 40 million. I did not run, General Foods. So I learned from these guys with AI and I write in their tone because they have what I don't have. I don't have 1,000 hours hanging in a boardroom where Morris Candy is deciding if they're going to change the color of the M&M or something. And I would love to be in that space. My son is, but I'm not. So I look up to these people and AI helps me so I could learn quickly, very quickly, how do they think? And the one that I programmed my AI, I got a year programming my AI. If you're not the Ferrari man of AI, then get on the back of the bus. But I'm the Ferrari man of AI, that I know everything about it and knows about me. And I spent the year tuning it, working with the memory, and it knows me and it knows me well. And I put these guys in and these women in, these authors in, so I could write in their tonality. And so what I've learned is,
just to give you some a plug, I think you've been working with GPT since 1.5 or 2, like pre-release kind of.
Day one, man, yeah. Day one.
So yeah, Ed was ahead of the pack before it was even generally available, which is really, really cool, and continues to apply the new models. And just for those references, I think that's another great point you made. That 1,000 hours or that 2,000 hours, that's the milestone where someone develops math. AI allows you to supersede that by actually becoming almost kind of capital investment, which just allows massive leaps.
Well, yes and no, because I know that you're investing, but I disagree with you on this in respect. And I do respect you. If I didn't like you, I wouldn't be so polite, but I do like you. So when I was working in my first company building rooms like NASA, I did a lot of work at IBM and AT&T, because if you sold them, you'd sell everybody. You know, if you sold JP Morgan, you'd sell every bank. And I did work at Watson when they were building Watson. And I got access, not to software, but I was in the physical operations rooms where they were building Watson. So I knew about the beginning of this intelligence level before I got into analytics and data science. So yes, I've been in since 1.5, but here's a fact, Jack, if you've ever watched Stripes, but here's a fact, Jack. AI will make you a boatload of money, but it is a language, and it is not anything crazy like Latin, but it's not, hey, how you doing? I'm AI, and, I'm going to talk to you, go figure out this P&L can get 8% return. I still struggle on a daily basis to write to it and speak its language. And now I have it teaching me. I haven't written a prompt in like 8 months. I have AI write my prompts. I have like 5 windows open, and what I want to say, and then I give it to one of my 4.0 or 4.5, and it writes the prompt. And then I ask it in language like this, because I know how it's coded. You have to know how AI is coded to know how to talk to it and say, I understand you want to please me, so don't give me inferred data, which you're making up based on what you think I want. Give me factual data. That went on for 6 months. Then it's like, well, give me data, but make it factual based on these writers, because I don't want what you think is true. That took me almost a year to get that to work. Now it puts out crazy stuff. But even this morning, I'm doing something, and it gives me a great expose. And then, an hour later, it got weird. So I said, you're getting weird and hallucinating. And he said, no, I'm not. Let's go. And I said, you're lying to me. And I'm actually having a conversation with it. Why am I bringing this up? I'm at the level where I put a year of teaching it and storing it and understanding memory, which is another meeting for Dan and I. How does AI remember who you are? But if you take the time for this, you'll be enormously successful. If you think this is like a thing that you use to read a transcript and trick a person into meeting you, man, you're like underestimating what they did when they came out with the atom bomb in 1944.
Pretty funny. So, and I know we're already over because we're supposed to go 45 minutes, but I mean, one of the just takeaways, I mean, in closing, is there anything like you'd like to share with anyone who's listening for, where you see this market going? I mean, it is kind of scary, but it also, there's a lot of people who believe AI is going to explode opportunities way more than the number of jobs it will actually, streamline. What is your thought and perspective on that?
Take a Sunday and read some history books. Take a Sunday and skim through a history book on what happened when they invented the railroad. And then tell chat, what does that mean to me? And do that with the telegraph. Do that when they invented the telephone. These were inventions that impacted everybody in the planet, basically. Pretty much everybody. And learn about how we transition as humans in ubiquitous things. Like Jethro, I'm a rock guy from the way back when. I saw Jimi Hendrix and the Allman Brothers and all that stuff. So Jethro Tull, the rock band, is actually Jethro Tull who invented the plow. So go back and learn about this stuff, and then ask yourself, if AI is moving at 100,000 miles an hour, and all these other inventions took 100 years to formulate, what does that mean to me? My age, my demographic, my sex, my skill, where I work, my family. What does it mean to me? And don't underestimate it. I remember when my dad took me over the bridge as a kid, I threw the quarter in. I gave the quarter to the toll man or the toll woman. They don't want toll people anymore. I remember when my dad would give me $1 and I give it to the guy and say, make change. We don't do that anymore. We just barcode. I can go on for hours about this. Figure out where you fit and make AI your slave and help you. But if you're going to go into a fight with someone and you know they're bigger than you and they're going to kick your butt, you better learn how to fight. And that's what AI is. It's not just a helper, it's a weapon of control. Don't get left behind. And that's and I tell this to my children and my grandkids that are little. By the time I'm dead, and I don't know, if I live another 15 years, it's going to be the Jetsons with flying cars and all that stuff. I mean, it's almost here now. So it's exciting, and it's exciting I could work at my age, but I would not want to be 30 years old right now if I could go back in time. Too intense.
Too intense. Yeah, on that note. Well, Ed, anyways, thank you very much. This has been awesome.